What if you could join a network of business leaders who share your Christian values, who reject the separation of faith and business, and who have a fierce vision for success? Welcome to Business Makers Network, a network that strives to create community, build intellectual wealth and practical business knowledge, and grow thriving businesses for the kingdom. We're not just another business network. We are a community of unapologetic Christian leaders who understand that success in business blesses our customers, blesses our families and employees, and in the end drives greater profits. All of Christ for all our business efforts as we aim to take the talents God has given us and turn them into 30, 60, and 100-fold. With a combined net worth already exceeding $1 billion in committed memberships, our members are reshaping the business landscape while staying true to our Christian values and taking dominion in the lanes God has paid for us. As a member, you'll gain exclusive access to our Business Makers Network app, discounts to live workshop events, network calls with key influencers, access to like-minded Christian business leaders, a pool of hands-on intellectual wealth and practical business knowledge, mentorship and menteeship programs. We will be rolling those out over the coming year. Read-only access for the tier above you for educational purposes. Invitations to our annual corporate partner dinner. Networking events at the Fight Laugh Feast conference. We offer membership tiers designed to match your business journey. From our exclusive double diamond level for industry titans, to our green membership for promising startups, to our MVP tier that is looking for a community of Christian, like-minded business leaders. There's a place for every serious business leader in our community. Your network is your net worth. Join Business Makers today and become a part of a movement that is changing the face of Christian business leadership. Visit our website now to secure your membership and step into a community where faith, business, and success align. Hey y'all, welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Pastor Toby Chuck Knox, I'm the Water Boy, and we're here with author Raymond Ibrahim. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
I think
Did he really though?
Sure.
That's all right.
See, I knew it.
I'm pretty sure I butchered it the first time we
Ooh,
had it on
that's
the
good.
show.
Now
That
rolled off the tongue right there.
Yeah, see, thank you.
That's his
I was
charismatic.
practicing.
That's his charismatic.
That's true. Yeah, I used to speak in tongues.
Speaking in tongues.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. It's actually Monday. Is what this is.
Yeah, we're in the
Don't
future.
forget. And apparently, I did not get the dress code for today's show.
No, you didn't.
You never get the dress code
I got
for
my
any
America
show.
shirt on. Make America Christian again.
Yeah, put a tie with it, brother.
I get an orange bow tie.
I don't know if that would make it better. I think
If you can't make the shirt better, it's hard to make America better. Come on, man. Come on.
Do you own a business or write a lot of proposals? If so, you should check out smartpricingtable.com. Smart Pricing Table cuts down on back and forth, incorporates powerful upsells, and allows you to create proposals at lightning speed. When your prospect is ready, they can e-sign and you're off to the races. Download the free guide, The Profitable Proposal Blueprint, at smartpricingtable.com. As mentioned just moments ago, we are very grateful to have Raymond Ibrahim in the studio with us, a widely published expert on the Middle East and Islam. He's the Distinguished Senior Shillman Fellow at the Gatestone Institute and the Judith Friedman Rosen Fellow at the Middle East Forum. His books include this one, Defenders of the West, Christian Heroes Who Stood Against Islam, Sword and Scimitar, 14 Centuries of War Between Islam and the West, and Crucified Again, Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. Raymond, thanks for coming in the studio.
My pleasure. Good to be with you, gentlemen.
Yeah, great to have you. And you're working on a brand new book.
I am.
It's called?
Tentatively titled Warriors of the Lord, the Military Orders That Stood Against Islam, or something to that effect,
Okay.
a subtitle.
Where would that pick up after Defenders of the West?
I wouldn't say it picks up after. Defenders of the West is really 8 biographies of various defenders. This it picks up right after, it starts off right at the end of the First Crusade.
Yes.
And this is the origins of the first military order, which would be the Templars, the Knights of the Temple. And we follow their career all throughout the crusading period.
Yes.
Until their untimely demise. And then also we look at the other really primary military order that comes into play is the Knights of the Hospital, the Hospitallers.
Yes.
And they were they play second fiddle kind of to the Templars, but not too much. And but ironically, once the Templars are gone, they come into their own.
Yeah.
They became the Knights of St. John. First they go to Rhodes, then they go to Malta.
Yes.
And then they're still around actually, but they've been demilitarized, obviously.
Right.
So we just look at their entire history, and I thought it was an interesting topic. It's not unlike Defenders of the West because what we're dealing with is Crusaders, but the most pious of the Crusaders, because these guys were literally military monks.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. And so much of the work you're doing is you're restoring history, especially to a bunch of Christians who have been brainwashed for decades. That said, I mean, and this is a kind of the Enlightenment project was to say basically religion causes wars. You believe in God, you believe in religion, you take religion seriously.
Look at the Crusades.
You're gonna become violent, and then Crusades, Inquisition, et cetera.
Exactly.
And so much of the work you're doing is say, wait, like no, that's not the story at all, and that's more of what you're doing in this book.
Absolutely, and you expressed it well. That's what I've been trying to do. These books, Sword and Scimitar, this one, the new one, I'm trying to offer correctives to basically generations of fake history that has been designed to do precisely what you're saying, and in great measure to emasculate Christian men, especially by convincing them that if they take up arms in any which way, they're evil, they're monstrous, evil, and then, like you said, evil crusaders, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I'm trying to show how all that is actually false, and it's intentionally so, you come to find out.
Yeah. Why are you making this connection to emasculating men?
Why do I make it?
Yeah.
Because that's what's I think there's this idea and there's this movement, and it's subverting the Christianity in the West. And basically I always call it doormat Christianity, which is basically, the whatever you want to call them, the left, the secularists.
We call it Rick Warren Christianity. But
yeah. To them, the most approved form of Christianity, which you can be, is to be a doormat, which begins and ends with turning the other cheek, being tolerant, never judgmental, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm trying to show, no, historic Christianity had a much more masculine side, if you wish, or muscular side. It was robust. I'm trying to bring back the Christianity of the court of whips and overturned tables type.
Yes.
There's that part too that they don't want you to think is part of Christianity. But without it, Christianity would not even have continued to exist, honestly, if you look at the history and the wars that went on and continued. In that book, I have a great quote, actually, you can read it. I think it's at the very end, from Teddy Roosevelt, where he says, if Christians did not take up arms, and he mentions from the very beginning, he primarily focuses on Muslims. He says Christianity would have been snuffed out centuries ago.
Right.
So I think there's this kind of movement to disarm Christians and tell them all you can do is just, turn your other cheek and pray, and don't do anything else.
So where did this modernist, revisionist history begin?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, to some measure, I would say with the Protestant Reformation, and I would only say that because there was...
watch it.
Watch
it.
Not from a theological point of view, because a lot of the early Protestants were big on just war as well. So it wasn't that, but it was this kind of, it became so much animosity for the Catholic Church that anything the Catholic Church did was wrong. Therefore, the Crusades were wrong.
I see.
And then, and the Muslims actually became rehabilitated in the sight of Western Europe because, hey, if they were fighting Catholics, maybe they weren't so bad after all. So I think, again, that's not a criticism of Protestant theology, which is really what matters. It's more of a historical development from the rift within Christendom.
Right.
That's where it begins. But I mean, that's, again, early Protestants didn't have this issue. So I think if you move forward to today, a modern Catholic is worse than a Protestant from those eras. You see what I'm saying? So there's also this issue with modernity that has poisoned this sort of emasculation thing has been going on for a while, and it's. So
would you say like 1700s is maybe where that narrative?
Yeah, and, basically, maybe with the Enlightenment and Voltaire, I don't know. These guys.
There's been a strain of this throughout the history of the church. I mean, there's actually a great book by a Roman Catholic author called Church Impotent, Leon Podles, and he's tracing the feminization of Christianity from the Middle Ages on, and I think there's always been a temptation there, a tendency to only want to talk about the Jesus meek and mild, and personal piety, and it's sort of a kind of a feminization of Christianity. And he traces it all the way up to the present, and just notes that there's always been some of that, and it's relatively rare to have Christian traditions that have actually been predominantly masculine and led by masculine men. And so I think it's what you're talking about is something that the church has faced, I think, for a long time.
Right. In fact, I grappled with this in the new book that I'm writing because as the military orders, the first military order, the Templars, that was a revolutionary concept. You're talking about a religious order that took up arms and was violent. Right. But if you look at, the overwhelming majority of theologians were on board with it. Yeah. There was some criticism saying, that's not right, but they were really on the outlier. They were just very, very minor. I would say today the majority would be against it, right? But so that sort of things you find it popping in and out throughout history. But I would argue that it was actually a minority, a very small minority interpretation. Even Augustine himself was. I mean, he's usually cited as the chief articulator of just war theory.
That's right. I remember I was pointing people to Hebrews. Hebrews 11 is this text of this, this hall of faith. All these heroes of the faith going back to Noah and Abraham and Sarah and others. And
some were sonnen too.
Yeah, but you actually have this, I think, a far more holistic picture of of what faith does. Mm-hmm. And some by faith went to war, routed armies, and defended their nation and won great victories. And some by faith were sawn in half, were chased into the mountainsides and died. But it depends on the moment. It depends on the situation. It depends on what you're called to and any number of details. But both of those can be faithful. You can have, the martyrs of the church who were faithful in preaching the gospel and then gave their lives and shed their blood in that way. And you have men who went to war and defended their country land, defended their wives and daughters and sons, and that's faithful too.
And to the excuse me, and to the Christians of the time, those who died were martyrs.
That's right. Yes.
I think it's also pertinent to point out, and this is something I actually got done writing in my book, but a lot of modern Christians are unaware, but the famous verse where they say to Jesus, about swords, and they say we have two, and you say that is enough.
Yes.
Do you know how that was interpreted and understood historically?
No.
Most people don't. It was interpreted and meant 2 swords are enough because 1 sword is what you will battle spiritual forces with, and 1 sword is for secular warfare.
Yeah.
That's how it was understood.
Yeah.
And theologians of the time, that's norm. That's how they would justify, for example, the Crusades. So we have 1 sword to fight demons and spirits in high places, etc.
Right.
And 1 sword for kings and princes to fight evildoers.
Right. So could that mean a reference to the Bible and to a physical sword
and your handgun?
It's made of steel.
How do I defend my family?
Yeah.
I defend my family with the Bible in one hand and my Glock in the other.
I mean, the idea of the sort of passivity that's attributed to Jesus. I just can't imagine Jesus standing by and if someone's breaking into your house, raping your wife, and killing your children, and Jesus is saying, "No, don't do anything."
Right.
How do you? I can't. No one, at least historically, could understand that that's what he meant.
The thing that I always say too is the kind of Jesus, the hippie Jesus, the pacifist Jesus that so many modern evangelicals think Jesus is. The thing that I think ought to really puzzle us is, how did he get himself killed? Why do you execute somebody?
He was rather pugnacious.
But we don't even have to ask the question of what Jesus would do if somebody broke into his house. The story's already in the Bible.
Right. Yeah, no.
He actually took their own materials, made a whip, and beat them with it.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we already know passivity wasn't on his list of things to be doing.
Yeah. How did you get into this area of study?
It's pretty innate, I guess. My background, my family is from Egypt. We're Coptic Christians.
Yes.
So growing up, obviously, I had an interest in Islam.
Just real quick, was your mom and dad, they grew up in Egypt?
Yeah, they immigrated here.
Were you born in Egypt?
No, I was born
here.
Okay,
you were born in Egypt. Yeah. So were they actually Coptic Christians in Egypt?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then moved here.
They moved here in the late 60s, I guess.
Okay.
Gay was asking because he didn't know if he had to call ICE or not, so he was trying to figure it out.
No, they did it legally. They're illegal. They didn't come through a porous border.
Hold on real quick.
Cancel that call.
That's why you're really here.
And they're not around anymore. So, I was born here, and due to that background, I obviously had an interest in Christians and Muslims.
Yes.
And then in college, I was majoring in history. Victor Davis Hanson was if you guys know.
Yeah, we always had him on the show.
Did the foreword to
okay.
your book, right?
Yeah. And he was my professor at the time. This is like almost 30 years back.
Wow.
And he was what he really was, and everyone knows him now as this kind of like pundit, current affairs guy, but he's a classically trained historian.
Oh, yeah.
And so his classes that I attended were military history courses, took a lot of those. And long story short, my master's thesis, which he was the chair of, was the first military encounter between Islam and Christendom.
Okay.
Because
when was that?
The first battle would be there's some smaller battles, but the first decisive major battle, 636 Battle of Yarmouk. That was my thesis.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was also the groundwork for my other book, Sword and Scimitar, because that book is about the decisive battles between the West and Islam, and it's chapter 1. But then I talk about all these other battles that move up all the way until America and Barbary Wars.
Yes.
But anyway, so I've had that interest since I was very young and in college. And then I went to, after 9/11 happened, that's when I graduated.
College. That's when you graduated college?
Yeah,
Wow.
2001.
Yeah.
That's when I finished my MA. And even on Victor Hansen's recommendation, he was like, hey, your field is becoming hot now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
And he even suggested, why don't you apply to other colleges? So I went to Georgetown. I was accepted there.
Okay.
Then I got a job at the Library of Congress working in the Middle Eastern department, and I had access to all these books in Arabic and Persian and Turkish, and it was awesome experience. And in fact, that's where my first book comes from, where I signed the contract in 2005. That's the Al-Qaeda Reader,
where
I basically translated Al-Qaeda material.
I've never met someone who got a job at a library and was just like on fire.
And it was awesome.
Yeah, I loved it.
That's how he described it. Like,
They don't make librarians like they used to.
Yeah, I don't look like a librarian. But
All of a sudden, like the librarian film sounds like, okay, yeah, I'm into it.
I want to go to his
It's
library.
like that's Indiana Jones type library.
For real.
That's great.
So anyway, that's how I basically was into this whole field. And then from that point on until like 2016, my writings dealt more with current affairs and Christian persecution in the modern era, radicalization of Islam.
Yes.
The modern stuff, terrorism. But then with the book before this, Sword and Scimitar, I kind of went back to my interest of history. So that's my native. I'd much rather write books like that than contemporary stuff. I live in the past, man. I'm like,
All your friends are old and dead.
I spend all day talking to Templars and hospitals.
You must really hate social media then.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you must.
So I got a question just about Egypt now. I know you're a historian. What are your thoughts about like Egypt? Your mom and dad obviously grew up there. They moved to the U.S. Like, what's been the progress of Egypt in, let's say, the last, I don't know, since the 60s, since
Yeah, well, that goes back to what you were saying, with Turkey. It's interesting. Most people don't realize when you look at these nations, Egypt, et cetera, and you see radical Muslims and the women in the hijab, et cetera. It's ironic because if you go back 50 years, it was like looking at Europe.
Yeah,
you never saw that. It wasn't just in Iran, even in Egypt. You rarely saw women in hijabs or the men with the the Islamic Salafi kind of look.
Like what dates are you talking about? Like what decades?
1950s and 60s.
Even before that.
Oh, really?
Yes, and a lot of it is in large measure due to the European colonial era.
Okay.
With the European colonial era of North Africa and Asia and Islamic nations, they actually became Westernized. They were Western looking.
Yes.
Not just physically Western
affluent
looking.
too,
They
right?
were. Yeah, and they were happy. Islam was actually seen, if you read historical, as I did, books written by Oxford Dons in the 1960s and 70s, Islam was dead. It was kind of like it was
in Egypt particularly,
in everywhere and in Egypt.
Wow.
So actually, the comeback, it was the surprise of Islam, and he really, it was shot off in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution.
Yes.
But then it became everywhere. A lot of it also is from Saudi Arabia because of the oil.
Yes.
They disseminate so much radical literature.
Yes.
They call them Wahhabis, but all that means is they're just literalist, purist Muslims. Radicals, right?
Okay. Right.
So they play a big measure in the dissemination of that sort of literature, and they support it.
So how did Egypt start to get, I guess, colonized by Muslims?
Yeah. Egypt's big thing, which actually impacted much of the Muslim world, is the Muslim Brotherhood. Was born in Egypt right around 1928. The Ikhwan, as they're known. And, out of them branched out almost every other, even terrorist organizations. CARE, if you guys have heard of CARE, they're a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yep. Did USAID fund Muslim Brotherhood?
Oh, yeah. During the Obama and Clinton era, they were their allies. They just... the
Brotherhood
for a time, they had one of their men was the president of Egypt, Morsi, Mohammed Morsi.
Okay.
And this was during the Obama era. They were close allies.
Wow. And this is I assume was sort of like the strategy was like they were trying to destabilize.
Yeah, this was the Arab Spring
Yes.
that quickly turned into a winter.
Right.
And it took different guises. One was that the Muslim Brotherhood won supposedly through a fair and free election. And others were the wars.
We had one of those in 2020.
I know. And then others were the freedom fighters who turned out to be ISIS, that we were supporting all along.
Osama,
right?
Freedom fighters. That started in the 70s and then
exactly. That goes way back.
Yeah,
we were the Mujahideen against the USSR.
So was there some major change then in foreign policy where? I mean, if you go from sort of a colonization kind of mindset, that is like we know that the best thing for the Middle East is Westernization, broadly Christendom, Christianity, and then, but at some point, did that stop? Or did something else?
Is there a revolution or
something else overtake it?
So I have a theory which I laid out in my older book, Crucified Again, which is basically. The golden. Okay, so that book is about persecution of Christians, and I use that as a litmus test to see how radical a Muslim society is. Obviously, the more Christians are persecuted, the more radical.
Yes.
And with the advent of the colonial era in Egypt, I actually look at that a lot. So they brought a lot of rule, and all of a sudden, the appeal of Islam, you have to understand from the beginning, unlike Christianity, was it helped you out. If you become Muslim, you're going to get richer. You're going to get more women. You're going to get more wives.
Yes.
You're going to be on the winning team, okay? Because that's how it grew. When Muhammad was a itinerary preacher, and he had like no followers for a decade. Yeah. And then once he started plundering and becoming successful and a powerful warlord, that's when they started joining the bandwagon.
Yes.
Then the Arab conquest. So really, it was always understood amongst Muslim, Islam makes you prosperous in the now. With the colonial era, all of a sudden Muslims started noticing, oh, now we're being ruled by these infidels, and they're bringing so much good stuff into the world.
It's gotta be
we
good.
have medicine, we have technology, we have education. So Islam, that's what I was saying. It started sort of falling and backsliding. It was no longer. It was seen as what ignorant people do, the low lives kind of. But my theory is that, in as much as the West started to withdraw, not don't mean militarily or even physically, but culturally withdraw and abnegate its own heritage and start poo-pooing its own culture and start praising Islam, Muslims started going back to Islam. And I believe that is that's how we went from 1950 and 60 and before, and Muslims were actually very westward looking to actually falling back into Islam.
Wow.
You are the lie of the world, right? If you lose your salt, guess what? There's no savor anywhere else, right? So that's amazing.
Yeah. So that would line up then right with, 60s and 70s here in the States.
Right.
You've got all this sort of repudiation of Christian roots.
And that's the birth of radicalization there.
And going back to Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion and Islam, and you're saying that kind of that virus took hold.
From Westerners proudly telling Muslims this is how we are and you should be like us, and them emulating, Westerners started condemning themselves, saying we're horrible, and you should do your way.
Go back to the native ways. Right. Go back to your ancient ways.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
And we exported that.
Yeah.
We were going the complete opposite way. Can that happen again, do you think?
You mean
because it seems like right now with Trump, there's a revival happening, if you will, of people saying, no, let's think about America first. Let's become self-sufficient. Let's focus on our own and get built so that we can be a blessing again to other nations. Yeah. Since we're going that trajectory, do you think, because right now things are pretty radical, the relationship between the two is pretty volatile. Is it possible to go the other way again?
It is possible because, excuse me, believe it or not, I might need some more.
Yeah, we got you.
Get the
man some water. He's about to preach in here.
Yeah, dry throat. Believe it or not, in the Muslim world, and I hate the fact that I'm associated with this. People think that I label all Muslims as evil, crazy, and radicals. They're not. A lot of the Muslims are just born into the religion, and they're just part of it. They don't even. Some of them don't know what it is. If something better comes along, and people in mass move, and
Yes.
a lot of it could happen. It's not inconceivable if it happened before.
Right.
Why wouldn't it happen again? And so a lot of Muslims themselves, remember, they're oftentimes the first victims of Islam.
Has Islam gone through any sort of woke moments? We've been exporting a lot from USAID and everything like that. Have we been able to export any of our social justice stuff, any of our postmodernism? Has anything that we've tried to export to Islam had any effect on it?
The only thing I've seen is they exploit it, which means it's not that they believe any of it, but they'll use that language when they're talking to the West. They'll talk about social justice. So I remember, for example, when I was translating Al-Qaeda's writings, in the Al-Qaeda Reader, the whole point was to show you what they were writing to each other in Arabic, which was pure radical ISIS stuff. And that's what I had found in the Library of Congress and no one knew about. And then the other thing was to talk about what they were writing to the West and we knew about. And what they were writing to the West, thank you,
Yes.
was just the whole social justice thing. They would actually complain about because the U.S. didn't sign the Kyoto Protocol about the environment.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll imagine Osama bin Laden complaining about that, right?
yeah.
Green energy.
Yeah. So that's the only thing I've seen, but I don't think woke madness has, to their credit, infiltrated Muslim lands.
Yeah, so then they haven't had, they haven't been reformed in any way by this new Western idea.
No.
That's interesting.
I mean, amongst the Muslims that I'm talking about who are more secularized, maybe some of them,
Yeah.
but extreme wokeness. I mean, we're talking about insanity. So
Right.
I don't.
That's still a woman, and she's wearing a hijab. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like it's ironic. We've noticed that you have these radical leftists who are all in on all kinds of sexual deviancy, homosexuality, whatever, transgender stuff, and but in traditional Islam societies, you don't get away with that.
Right.
I mean, you
die.
you see the videos of people getting pushed off buildings and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and you're saying and they're the same ones doing the Palestinian protests.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying.
It's like, wait a second. I don't know that you want them because,
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to push you off a building if they actually
They get in control.
If they get in control here, right?
Yeah, because they're idiots, and you're talking about the leftists who are like,
Yes.
yeah, of course,
Yes.
they just. Yeah, that malady affects them, but the Muslims would use it. They would exploit it for their own.
So they don't mind
purposes.
exploiting it to get a foothold
Sure.
in universities
Yeah.
and get people warming up to Islam.
Islam is elastic enough
Yes.
to work with infidels and homosexuals and
Yes.
whatever, as long as the end result benefits Islam. No,
Is
that's-
their power.
We're going to establish Sharia.
It's interesting. Right.
I'm sorry to cut you off. To go with what you're saying, there's this city I think in Michigan or Minnesota, Hamtramck.
Okay.
Dearborn. Are you talking about?
Well,
Dearborn?
no, I know
Okay.
Dearborn.
Okay.
But Hamtramck, it's got a weird name, Hamtramck or something. Anyway, apparently it's like more than 50%. The city council is Muslim majority.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe the city itself is Muslim. It's like maybe 50% or more.
Okay.
And there was this big fallout because once the city council came into power and became Muslim, they banned all gay stuff.
Yeah.
And all the homosexuals got so upset
Yeah,
saying,
'cause they
we
voted for
supported
them
you.
all.
Yes.
We supported you.
Yes.
We wanted you. We voted for you. And now you betrayed us.
And they're like,
Surprise!
Yes. Thank you very much. We'll take it from here.
Guess what's coming next?
Yeah. Well, that's,
Exactly.
But that's what's been. I mean, that's what's happening on a broad scale in Europe and England. I mean, the Islamification of Europe is kind of the same thing. You've got all these woke, lefties saying multiculturalism, welcome the immigrants. You in the name of, I guess, fear of a new Third Reich or something like this. And then,
You're about to get it.
That's the thing.
Yes.
You're pushing people to do that.
Right.
I mentioned it earlier. Like the pendulum swings. The rise of guys like the Fuhrer. There were social forces that were pushing it that way.
Right.
And actually, what's happening with this influx of migrants and Muslims and the criminality and the rapes and the grooming and all that sort of thing, that is what will bring about something like that.
Right. Yeah, you get riots in response to that already.
Right.
And those riots will turn violent, and then eventually that energy will coalesce if there is not a actual reasonable solution.
So, for example, in Germany, there's the AfD party, which I would never in no way liken it to, Hitler. It's not. Their enemies, the left, would try to present them as they're the future Hitlers, and they're nothing like that. They're actually pretty liberal. Yeah. But they're very anti-immigration.
Yes.
And I remember I spoke to them actually. I spoke at their parliament or whatever 10 years ago, And anyway, they were pretty small then and didn't get a lot of, but now they're huge. And a lot of Germans who are very liberal are voting for them. And I think they have almost like majority seats or something.
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
and it's all because of the migration issue.
Right.
Is Europe screwed?
You know, it's funny because I was asked that question in Denmark about a year ago, and there's a minute video of my response, and apparently it went viral. It's received millions and millions of views.
It's good to know my questions go viral. It's good to know. All right.
Yeah, that question actually. So I'll summarize it. Are they screwed? Yeah. Next. No, all right.
I'm asking about us next.
Europe basically is like, it's this, a place that just created its own problem. You created your own headache. It's going to get worse before it gets better. This never had to be like that. And all you have to do is look at those countries who didn't allow Muslim migration. Right. Hungary, for example, maybe Poland.
Poland a little bit, yeah.
And it's kind of like they don't have these problems, do they? People can walk on the streets. Women aren't being raped left and right. So it wasn't that hard. You just put up a fence, right?
Yeah.
So this is like all self-induced problems.
Right.
And it's just, it's why they're doing it and what's the grand plan. Places like England or the UK in general, Sweden. There's this areas in Sweden. It's like a war zone. Yeah, Malmo, or I think, and it's just like.
But you don't own guns in Sweden.
Yeah, well, but they have scimitars.
Wow, pretty soon we're going to have Christians finding their swords.
Yeah.
Swords are the only
sword and scimitar. The book I wrote.
Yeah.
The title is coming to roost.
Doggone. So then, okay, if Trump were to call you and say, "Hey, I want you to be my specialist on this," what would be your plan on policy dealing with? Who would you even mark off as our kind of the Muslim lead places in the East?
Well, I mean,
Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah,
Dearborn's a problem. We got to talk
domestically.
About that.
Obviously, and no way, room, shape, or form for any kind of Sharia introductions, because these laws, I mean, they're in the UK, and they play around with the laws. They introduce it, but all it is allowing Sharia stipulations to kind of creep in
between contracts is what I said in Dearborn, right?
Yeah,
and then judges are honoring that. So, well, since you made your contract, I have to honor your Sharia.
So that would have to go, and migration from known radical nations. I mean, one of the worst, to be honest with you, is like Somalia.
Yes, and Minneapolis. Look at Minneapolis.
And I look at Minneapolis, and it's kind of like. And it's not, and then they treat that as racism. It's not racism. He did that a while back. Trump, the first term. Remember, they called it the Muslim ban.
Right.
But it was like 7 nations.
It was 7. It was, and some of them weren't even Muslim, but it was the 7 nations that were like known for terrorism. I mean, it's a smart, simple solution. It's like what we were talking about with Hungary and Poland. So that sort of thing, but. The truth is, in America, Islam is not as much of a problem as in Europe, because Muslims are like, I think, something like 1% or 2%, and that's why they they can be curtailed. The issue is, here's the thing, about Islam that you have to understand, and is in Islam, it's like it's a political ideology. I mean, Islam is not the Christian idea or separation of church and state, whatever that means, but. It's very much in the now. It's not something I do in my heart with God or some belief. Mm-hmm, It's very much, Sharia law is everything about the now. And, one thing is Muslims are obligated to be loyal to Islam and not loyal. The Quran tells them they have to hate non-Muslims and they cannot be loyal to them. Can you imagine that's what it says? And to me, that's like, how do you come to America and take the pledge and, pledge loyalty to a nation that's run by infidels when your own book is telling you can never do that?
Right.
So, I mean, I would like to see these questions at least brought up and openly debated with Muslims instead. But of course, they would never do that in this, climate because freedom of religion.
But maybe we're creeping up on that.
Maybe.
I mean, it seems like what we're seeing in the UK and in Europe, though, is starting to get people like, wait, what's going on? And the kind of corruption that's being uncovered in police and law enforcement, where they're looking the other way, allowing these crimes to be committed in the name of multiculturalism. This is just their culture. They beat their wives. They rape.
They rape yours.
Yeah. It's like, kind of like the tranny thing has kind of really backfired. I mean, in the last couple of years, and in the States especially, you had all this momentum, and there's these hospitals doing all these awful surgeries, and all of a sudden people are like, wait, you're doing what? to 12-year-old girls? You're doing what to little boys? And you know, you're disfiguring them for the rest of their life. You're giving them these hormone blockers and all the rest of it. And a whole bunch of like not particularly pious people, just like kind of red-blooded American types were like, no, like you can't do that. And I wonder if something similar is about to happen where it's like, okay, your holy book says some stuff that it's like you got to pick. Like you can't be doing this because this is inherently political, it's inherently cultural, it's inherently antagonistic to our way of life, to Christian way of life. I wonder if we're creeping up on a line where people will actually say, no, wait, you want to do what?
Yeah, well, the thing about Islam is it actually has a game plan that is like that based on Muhammad's own life.
Right.
If you look at the Quran, it's actually divided in phases, and this is how the exegetes understand it, which is basically Muhammad's earliest career, he preached peace because he was weak and outnumbered.
Right.
Then he went to Medina and he became basically a warlord.
Right.
And there's a transitional phase where, he said, okay, you can fight back now. And then there's the final phase where he says, now you can go on the offensive.
Right.
And I'll give you a funny anecdote from when I was at the Library of Congress with a Somali.
Okay.
And he was my friend because we worked in the same place and we would, speak Arabic because that's what they speak. And but he was a serious Muslim, and I would always pick his brain. And so, I would ask him about the violent verses. They're known as the Mecca verses are the peaceful, and the Medina verses are the violent ones. Okay, so I would be like, well, what about the violent verses, this and that? And he finally got frustrated, and he's like, well, I'm living in Mecca right now.
Peace.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm in the phase of being peaceful because I'm weak and outnumbered.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's facts.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, ask the homosexuals. They're figuring out that in some cities, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens
We're
when
in
it turns.
We're in the Mecca
Yeah,
right
when
now.
it turns.
Right.
So then, what is it? I guess I don't know which one to ask first. I have two questions. I kind of want to know, what do you think makes the West strong, and then what does Islam think makes the West strong? What do they think our strength is?
Why do they want the West?
Well, I know why they want it.
I think what made the West strong is Christianity and Christendom and that energy. And I think the reason the West is still strong is because it was such a strong heritage that we're kind of living off borrowed time and borrowed resources from that being squandered left and right, of course.
Right.
As far as what Islam just thinks we have good technology, and so for the longest time they would say learn their technology, learn their scientific ways, but do not deal with their culture or their religion because that's all poison.
Okay.
So they would think we're advanced technologically.
And so they just think it's our technology. So if they learn that, they think they can.
Yeah.
They want to take our knowledge
Right.
and then re-employ it.
Yeah, and I would say that's actually a lot of cultures, not just Islam.
Sure.
They really look down on Western culture. I mean, but because of this woke trans stuff, it's so despicable to normal people.
Right.
I mean, as despicable it is to us, to people outside of the West, it's just like, what?
Yes.
You people are having problems figuring out using pronouns.
Right.
Like we're really kind of we're
It
kind of
is embarrassing.
stupid,
It's embarrassing.
Yeah. It's
I have to say, it's. And this is how bad it is. They have us so, brought down. Our standards are so brought down low that we need our president to intervene and, get rid of pronoun stuff.
Right.
And to us, that's a victory.
Right.
And we're happy. Like, what a waste, Shouldn't we be doing something else with our time and energy?
Right.
So for most of the non-Western world, when they look at that, and I see it and I read it and I watch it, I mean, to them, it's a joke.
Right.
It really is to our shame, a rejection of our Christian heritage here in the U.S.
Well, but to his point, it's like this is a rejection of common sense. I mean, this is a rejection.
This is insanity.
Yeah, it's a kind of it's a madness that has overtaken us, and it's not even. I mean, we've rejected Christianity too.
Yeah.
But it's like we're down at the bottom of that barrel.
Yeah.
And what's also going on, this is something that weighs on me often, and this is how I think the West and Christian nations have been so compromised. And the best analogy is, the boiling frog.
Yes.
Right? And for whoever doesn't know, it's basically the idea that if you throw a frog in boiling water, he jumps out. But if you put him in tepid water and slowly boil it, he stays until he dies.
Right.
And I think that's what's going on. What happens is, I was watching a video from the 1960s, and it's from California of all places, and it's a teacher or some kind of school administrator warning children about homosexuality.
I seen that, yes. They smoke.
Yeah, and he's like, and if you're engaged or doing anything with any of these homosexuals, and they had commercials warning children, okay? how did we get to that, to where we're here? But I'll tell you how we didn't get there. They didn't throw tranny stuff on us right away, because that would have been throwing the frog in the boiling water, and we would have gotten it and jumped out. But they did it very, very slowly. First it started, actually homosexuality is a normal thing. They're just born that way. And then the medical establishment and the psychologists, the same guys who got COVID, shoved down our throat, told us it's absolutely normal. Then the sitcoms started they showed them in a sympathetic way. And then it became okay. And then every movie you saw, there it was. And then they started turning the heat up till they got us to where we're at. Now the sad part is, and here's the sad part, because again, think of the heat thing. If you let's say you put a frog in 200 degrees and he's really hot, and let's say normal is like 70, okay? If you bring it down to 120, he's going to be grateful. But it's still
cooking you.
Yes.
So they got us. They're like throwing this insane stuff at us, the trans stuff, the pronoun stuff, to the point that once it goes away, we're happy to accept normal homosexuality. That's awesome. That's perfect. We'll take that. Because it's kind of lowering the heat, even though in reality it's still pretty bad.
120 degrees or whatever.
So I think that's been going on. That kind of approach has been totally compromising American civilization.
We've talked about this a fair bit on here, just because of, the craziness of how Trump, these executive orders that you have to use the right pronouns, or what, it's like,
a man is a man.
The insanity that we like, that's a win.
Yeah.
And it's
for us to be happy about that.
Yes,
how sad.
Exactly. And I think also, and so with that, on the one hand, you can be grateful, like, okay, there's some sanity, and on the other hand, it's like, this is insane that we're here. And I think the temptation, of course, is your point, is now that it's 150 degrees. All right, well, we're fine. It's just normal homosexuality. It's just,
but we don't realize that it's still hot.
Yeah, right.
It's really bad.
You can't defy the law of God, which is the law of nature. You cannot defy that a little bit and be in a safe place.
Yeah, right.
It's just a little bit of defiance.
A little bit of gravity defiance.
But it's that's already a small bit of madness. You're saying, I can live in this world and I can be blessed and defy the one who made me and the one who made this world.
That's right.
And so it's like, no, that is a slippery slope. And so even if you turn it back to 150 degrees, it's like, that is going to go right back up to 200 again. It's going to go right back up to boiling again. Just give it a few. They're doing the Muslim game. I'm in Mecca right now. I'm in Mecca.
What do you want from me? I preach peace.
But there's a Medina.
But once we're in power and you're not, guess what? Now we're in Medina.
Now we're in Medina.
So then, you've done a lot of research, and your book, Defenders of the West. You talk about the heroes that saw the moment, saw the time, and they stood up. So then, what does a defender of the West do at this point?
That's the question, right? Those guys took up arms and just fought. What's the defender of the West to do now? That's the issue. I often think to myself, look, nobody wants violence, no one wants war, but like, what is the point where you say, okay, there's no solution except war? The founding fathers, it took a tea tax,
right?
That was enough for them to go to war, and when do we? What is that final, straw on the camel's back going to be? Because I think to a lot of different civilizations throughout time, we've gone way past that, and I think people have been so conditioned, in America, the idea is you never go to war because, hey, we've given you freedom of speech and you can vote. So there it is.
Right.
But then the whole system has become rigged.
Yes.
It's not, you can't win through that, whether it's because they suppress freedom of speech or whether because they've cowed people from speaking because people don't want to be canceled. So what, I don't know. What's the, if you look at the way we're going, even we have Trump now, but to me, it's always like one step forward, two steps back. That's the kind of the trajectory of America, which is ultimately a downhill. It may go up and down, but it's a constant downwards. And I don't know what's that point when people just say enough is enough. Like you just said, they're mutilating children.
Right.
That would have been grounds for war. Okay. For a lot of people.
Right.
T-tax.
Yeah,
abortion.
Which is worse.
Yeah. We have 65 million dead babies from abortion. And
which goes back to the emasculation of men, and that's the project.
Yes.
As long as men have been emasculated, they know they will not do anything about it.
Right.
And I think that is one of the main reasons. Every message is to emasculate men and just, and supposedly empower women, make women feel like they're the men.
Right.
And weak men fall for that. It's bombarded on them from movies and everything.
Right.
And they become demoralized or whatever, and that's what you want. If you want to control a society, you don't need men in that society.
That's right.
If you have men, you're going to have a problem,
Right.
because they actually are men and they do things and they respond.
Of course, the irony of all of this is that there's still a military and there's still police officers who are still enforcing what all the leftists want. So like, you don't need to be strong. You don't need to be strong, except for us.
Yeah.
I mean, this was like during COVID when it was like, the celebrities complaining, and then all of a sudden when the protests came into their locked neighborhoods, they freaked out. It's like, wait a second,
Get him out of my neighborhood.
Yeah, but the BLM and all the rest of it. But I think you're right. There's always men with guns.
Right.
There's always men with guns. The question is are they righteous men?
Yeah.
Are they godly men? Are they God-fearing men? Do they believe in justice and truth, or not?
Yeah.
But there's always men with guns. I think. Well, I'll just leave that there.
I am a little hopeful because I don't think we've ever seen this before, where we've gone so far this way and we're coming back without a war. Like, I think there is, like, the pendulum is swinging, and I'm watching, I was just noticing we are actually having, usually when you have Democrats and Republicans work together, it's not usually for your good, but we're having Democrats and Republicans work together to dial the temperature back. It might not be completely turned off, but they're working to dial the temperature back, which is shocking. Tulsi Gabbard and JFK, like, I'm surprised. RFK, sorry.
JFK ain't come back yet.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. We don't know. The papers haven't been released. He might be under a bunker somewhere. So it's encouraging in a lot of ways, and you want to see that momentum go. And the way the Democrats have been talking and the way that they're moving right now, losing the people who are the moderates in their own party, they're setting this up for another 8-year run of sanity. Yeah. And so what I'm hoping is, like, we've had an engaged Christian. I've never seen Christians become more political in the last 10, 20 years than I have, like, now.
It's
amazing because that's been a Trump phenomenon that I don't understand. He's the one that started engaging Christians in a way.
I think there's been I think classical education and Christian education has been at the ground level of all of that.
It strikes me too, as we were looking at, as we studied the founding era. I mean, there was 100 years, 80 to 100 years of groundwork going on in the colonies that led up to 1776. Right. It wasn't just 1760s and a tea tax and then that's it. We've had it up to here.
And there's a first great awakening.
There were faithful pastors and teachers in the 1680s and 1690s
that weren't emasculated.
That were not emasculated, who stood up to British tyranny then and had some pretty significant run-ins and collisions. And I've wondered if COVID and BLM and the tranny nonsense and all kind of the pushing way over the edge is one of these moments that's really woken a lot of people up. We may not be ready for something right now, too chaotic, too disunified, whatever, but I'm praying that this is the beginning of something similar, and if it came to it, we would have the ability to stand together and defend our Christian way of life. Maybe 80 years from now, maybe our grandkids, maybe our great grandkids.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
that's what we're praying for.
Yeah.
Raymond, Ibrahim, thank you very much, brother, for coming. Defenders of the West, go get it, read it. And when's your next book coming out?
Probably maybe 8 months, I'm thinking.
Okay, get ready for it.
Yeah.
Watch his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politics.